Sailboat interiors used to be beautiful, gorgeous cigar lounge looking gentlemen's clubs of fine finishes and expert joinery. It was a lot of work to keep it looking like this, but when the end result was this beautiful, it was kind of worth the effort. But today we get this, or even this. Why is that? For Practical Sailor, I was doing an interview with a yacht broker talking about sailboat insurance and boat values. You can see that over here if you want to watch it. But in between questions, he said something very interesting. We were talking about these new sailboat interiors, and he mentioned that sourcing for teak was extremely hard. It was environmentally potentially bad and also potentially unethical. I had to dive down the rabbit hole to find out what he meant, because I like teak interiors, and I often wondered where they went. I thought it was just like these new boat manufacturers being mean and making garbage interiors. We know teak to be the pinnacle of sailboat interiors, and not just because it's beautiful, but teak wood is also resistant to rot. It tends to last forever, which is why so many boat builders love it so much. It's naturally resistant to rot, and it has no known natural enemies like bugs and insects. Termites don't like it. It's resistant to them. It's highly resistant to mold too, and when it's used for boats, it's naturally oily, so it tends to last a long time even in salt water, and when finished, it's naturally non-slip surface, so we don't have to add anything before we walk on it, even when it's wet. Teak is kind of perfect as long as you don't mind the upkeep. And teak is the pinnacle of high-end everything. Rolls-Royce has a history of using it in their cars, because not only is it beautiful, it's considered a fine finish, a rich wood for rich people. When someone compliments the wood finish in the car, you can say, ah, yes, that's teak. It's like the Gucci of wood, the Prada of proud finishes, the Louis Vuitton of, well, Louis Vuitton. All that fancy does drive the price of teak up, of course. But that's not teak's only problem for big manufacturers that build a lot of boats, like Beneteau. Teak only grows in certain parts of the world, and sadly, those parts of the world have spent much of the last century either in war or near to it, or in great poverty. Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, was under military rule from 1962 to 2011 and has been at unrest ever since. Civil wars have been a constant feature in Myanmar, and that's where most of the teak came from. The supply and demand for teak has been unbalanced, and of course, we found ways to farm the stuff. Planting teak for use in boats or other construction has been done, but the teak builders, they want old growth, 60 to 100 years old. This way, it's long and thick enough to use for what we need it for, and modern farmed teak is usually cut down around 20 years, so it's much smaller. In my research, here's what a man called Joe Carlton, a naval architect, had to say. Farmed teak is often just 20 years old, and getting long planks is almost impossible. But labor intensive? You bet. Expensive materials? You bet. It's not just teak that you have to buy, but quarter sawn heartwood. And not just quarter sawn heartwood, but you have to find it in 2-inch rough sawn thickness and at lengths of around 20 feet. At this point, it becomes very much like pink unicorns. For practical purposes, it no longer exists. Even veneer decks, half-inch after sanding, on marine plywood, something else that's expensive, are a practical impossibility unless you're as rich as Croesus, and have no conscience about cutting down what little is left of the stuff in the Burmese forests. Now consider fake teak, like fake teak decking, 6 millimeters thick, complete with caulking lines, king plank and covering boards, precision cut on a CamCAD router to the exact shape and requirement, delivered right to the boat builder, ready to be stuck down with adhesive. There's no work involved in that. What's not to like? It looks good, or it looks okay, or it looks bloody cheap and nasty next to the real thing, and it's usually full of mistakes. But the boat builder loves the fact that there is no or very little skilled labor involved in using it, and they know it'll fit. No craftsman required. And the boat builder knows that their clientele does not know that nibs don't have round edges and deck planks don't stop at bollards and start again on the other side, amongst other sins. Dennis Shosbrook, a yacht builder, said, As a yacht builder for the past 20 years, we've been purchasing teak for 2 decades. Teak, Tectona grandis, its Latin name, has been considered by many to be the gold standard for decay resistance, and its heartwood is rated at very durable. The wood is stable, resists rot, provides an attractive and slip-resistant surface, and it's relatively easy to cut and shape with everyday woodworking tools and machines. There is one problem though. Over-harvesting has created a supply and demand imbalance. There is simply not enough readily available teak to meet the demand. The result? Prices go up and availability goes down. Teak is valuable because it's rare. Teak trees grow naturally in only 4 countries in the entire world: Laos, Thailand, India, and by far the most significant, Myanmar, formerly Burma. Myanmar supplies about 3/4 of the worldwide consumption of teak. Over the past several decades, teak has been heavily logged in these countries. In 1990, forest cover accounted for 58% of land in Myanmar. By 2010, that number had shrunk down to 47%. Myanmar banned the export of raw teak lumber in 2014, exclusively shutting down exports. In April of this year, the Myanmar environmental director predicted a complete ban in the near future. This news has rippled through the world of teak consumers, raising concerns about the future of teak availability entirely. Several companies, recognizing the opportunity, have developed and brought to market alternatives to teak, including synthetic teak. The first attempts missed the mark entirely. They looked like plastic, they were slippery, and they faded with exposure to UV light. The current versions are much better. They simulate a high grade of teak, have the texture and color of teak, and are slip resistant. Another reason for teak not being used as much is the amount of maintenance and care required to keep teak decks in ship shape, yacht condition. Yacht owners expect their multi-million-dollar boats to be in first-class condition at all times. Synthetic teak requires only a fraction of the time and effort to maintain. So that brings us to Beneteau and other major boat builders making stuff like this. In the early 2000s, Beneteau was experimenting with other woods in construction for a spell there. Interiors were peeling apart, and Beneteau was sending a team to fix them for free on the new boats. They would strip the peeling wood down and refinish it brand new on boats that were just a few years old. Once the boat was out of warranty, though, there wasn't much that they would do for you. In the early 2000s, they had to adapt. They're using veneers now, like Alpi, which is a company that does woods ethically sourced, sustainable, and much more readily available than teak. It is still a veneer, though, but it's done so with all the right materials, so it does last. In the transition to veneers, big boat manufacturers changed something: the sailboat recipe. We were used to teak and holly and mahogany, deep finishes in solid wood, and new boats look like this. Flat pack furniture, IKEA often being used to describe it. Is this a significantly more functional bedroom than yesteryear? Yes, absolutely. More storage, easier to maintain, better bed that's actually shaped like a bed, easier to clean and easier to live with. Is it better? That's a matter of opinion. For me, no. I prefer real wood, real structural wood. So I have a choice in my next boat, as do you. If I want uber function in my interior that does everything very well, I'll have to have veneer. If I want uber function but made out of real wood, I'll have to win the lottery. Because yes, you can still buy old world craftsmanship if you really want to. Here's the new Hylas 46, and at first glance you might think this is a Hanse Christian from the 1980s, but it's not. This is a new boat. They just built it. Companies like Hylas are building boats with today's amenities, sugar scoops and aft cabins, just like Beneteau does. But Hylas is doing it the old way, with wood, craftsmanship, expert joinery. This is not a boat built to mass production. It's a boat built to a standard, and it shows. But it's also why this is a $1 million boat. If I want old world build with real woods, then I'll have to pay for it. Everything in boats is a compromise, after all. In consulting, helping people buy boats, I'm often asked for a boat with a sugar scoop and an aft cabin and a huge cockpit and all those modern amenities that can still cross an ocean and is sort of battle-hardened. Something with extra thick bulkheads and chain plates, heavy glass layup, and tabbing that's indestructible. So, production boat amenities with battleship capabilities. And yes, you can have both, but not for $200,000. Look at the IP 440. It is both, but it's also $400,000. I want to thank the people who make these videos possible, the team of people who have become patrons. For as little as a couple of dollars a video, you can help support the mission here at Lady K Sailing, which is to get more people sailing more easily. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you guys so much.